All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our student grant writing webinar. We looks like we're going to have some participants continuing to log on over the next few minutes, but in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, the way this is going to go is we're going to have our speakers give their prepared remarks on research design, development, methodology, all of those things. And then after that, we will have the Q&A. Feel free to start putting your questions in as they're speaking if you think of something, but we won't be addressing the questions until the end. I'm not expecting it to take a lot of time, but we will have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. And if we don't get to your questions in the Q&A, feel free to email me, Lindsay Paderowski at Franco, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions if for some reason, we don't get to them today. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. I am Lindsay Paderowski. I'm the Student Grants Program Manager at the Franco Family Institute. We also have today with us Michael Skalski. He's the Associate Program Director, Office of Grants and Fellowships at the Graduate School. Who's going to be speaking with Michael today, we have Matilda Nasser, the Assistant Director of National Fellowships for CUES. And then we also have, who's going to be speaking on creative projects, Rebecca Struck, who's the Managing Director of the Notre Dame Arts Initiative. These tips and tricks and guidelines that we're going to be presenting today all relate to undergraduate and graduate funding. They will help you apply for your internal grants, but we're also hoping that these will make you a stronger grant writer for external grants as well. So these are fairly universal guidelines that should help you with all of your grant writing now and in the future. There's our introductions. So we are going to go ahead and get started with Michael and Matilda.
Take it away, Michael.
All right. Hello, everybody. So, you're preparing your grant application to get your project funded. Number one struggle that most people encounter is, well, how do I start? Well, I usually advise, let's start with the introduction. Keep that introduction simple, clear, and to the point. So, our recommendation is, what is your research? Tell us in two, three sentences about the topic, the questions you're trying to answer, and then why are you asking for this grant? How is this specific opportunity going to help you with that project? Mathilda, if you have anything to add,
I don't have
then
anything to add.
let's go to the next slide, where the actual stuff begins.
Okay, so this slide is more focused towards undergrads. For your previous research section, you want to give a brief literature review. If you don't know what a literature review is, it's basically an analysis and synthesis of existing scholarly research on your topic. For the purposes of a grant proposal, it doesn't have to be thorough, just enough to give the reader context of where your research falls. It also will justify the need for your research. You shouldn't be duplicating existing research, and your research should make sense given the literature. So you should really be giving the reader, your reviewer, whoever's reviewing your grant proposal, an idea of what gaps your research is filling. And for the most part, this section is going to be about 3/4 of a page to 1 page. Next slide, please.
Now, grad students, you need to do a little more there. The goal of the previous research section, whether it is a Franco Institute, application or any other grant application, uh, you need to achieve a couple things through your literature review. One is to establish intellectual merit of the project you're proposing and of the expertise, the mastery of the subject you have achieved. So, thinking about what to put there. It is not going to be an extensive lit review. We do not have that space. I mean, here, within 5 pages, you need to save some of that space for your project's design. But provide enough of that literature scholarship context to justify the need for your proposed work. Use a good mix of current, up-to-date literature, some older foundational works. Discuss the trends. Where is the field that you're working on heading? By doing so, show that you are contributing to an ongoing conversation in your field. All right. It is not, you're not working in a vacuum with ideas that, you just came up with. All right. There's influences on you, people you might be disagreeing with who have come before you. Discuss that briefly. And when you do that successfully, you will show us that you actually know what you're talking about. You have done your reading. You have achieved a high level expertise in the field. And that you also know that the work that you're doing is contributing to that conversation and has the potential to expand our understanding of the field that you're working on. Next slide. Then, graduate students, is the time to talk about the project you're designing or the design of your project. Knowing what gaps in literature you're filling, where you are in relation to the scholars who came before you. We need to know what it is that you're going to do. So, the project's design has multiple parts to it. I like to separate them or think about them as the theory, methodology, and methods. Whether you're aware of that or not, whether you like theory or not, some theoretical principles definitely guide your thinking about your sources, your source material, your data, and guide your analysis of that raw data. So, very briefly, what are those theoretical principles, approaches that inform your interpretation? Discuss that briefly. And this could be part of that intellectual merit previous research section if your work is heavily theoretical. But make sure that you connect that to what comes next, which is the methodological approach. Then, what is methodology? It is not just a laundry list of tasks. It is an argument for what you're doing is the best way of doing it. So think about the intellectual steps that need to be done to answer your question. I will show you an example in a couple slides of how that methodology might work in one field, but don't stop at methodology for data collection only. Continue that through the project of how you're going to interpret those results. What, again, theoretical and methodological approaches will inform that interpretation. All this is here to serve the purpose of showing the reviewers you have a plan for your work, and this plan is the best way of attacking it. So if we skip to the next slide, I just have a brief chart, very generic, of different types of research methodologies that you are in some way or form working with. Now, be mindful of it and discuss it. Field specific, historians will rely on even more specific fields of qualitative/descriptive analytical research. Social scientists might work with more quantitative or surveys and case studies. So there is more to it. But broadly speaking, start digging into what is it that you're doing. Also, an important reminder, if your research involves human subjects, you will still need to apply for the Institutional Review Board approval. Matilda?
Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so keeping in mind everything that Michael just said, for if you're an undergrad, you will need to do very similar things, just maybe with a little bit less detail, although I always advise my students to go as detailed as they possibly can. However, what you want to make sure that you answer in the research methods section, are these two main questions here. So, what are you doing and why are you doing it? So for the question, what are you doing? You want to tell the reviewer the exact steps in order that you will take to carry out your research. This can include everything from participant identification, if that's applicable, recruitment, your opt-in or opt-out method or other method, informed consent, a survey or interview questions, if applicable, how you will collect your data, how you will store it and disseminate it, any privacy and confidentiality issues, and then finally what you'll do with the data after you finish your project. So that answers mostly the what are you doing part. And then the second part, which is equally as important, is why are you doing it? So why did you choose these methods? And why are these methods the best for your project? We can go to the next slide.
Here is the example I was talking about. It's a historical work, real thing. I did not come up with this just for the purposes of this exercise. But I like to show this to grant writers uh, because the author of this proposal made very clear those intellectual, methodological, and methodical steps, right? So what we see in green are what needs to be done in order to answer the research question, right? So examine evolution of border policies. How is this going to be done? Methods? By reading sources like treaties, customs, regulations, resolutions, bulletins, etc., etc. Second, what needs to be done? Isolating some sites of contact, like youth exchanges, festivals, delegations. That person will be able to pull out, again in blue, from materials of secret police forces, etc., to find out how those things work. I hope this, short example helps you visualize that process, the intellectual process that, both applies to the methodological level and to that list of tasks that Matilda was just talking about. Ideally, if I was a writer and in my job as a consultant helping you review your proposals, I would also ask, well, where are you finding those documents? Would it be worthwhile to put in, well, to this extent, to find them, I will visit Archive X in Washington, D.C., or Moscow, Russia, or wherever it may be. I think we're ready for next slide.
Okay, moving on to the schedule for completion. This is very straightforward. It's basically a timeline of your project from start to finish. For undergrads, it can be a semester or 1 year usually. For grad students, it can vary. It could be shorter, it could be a little bit longer. You would want to explain when each stage of your project is taking place, starting with foundational research, travel, if that's what you're applying to do, um, data collection, data interpretation, the writing, the synthesis, and then your final paper, presentation, or publication, or whatever you are doing with this research. For grad students, you'll need to do a little bit more in this section. You'll need to situate it in the context of your graduate training. So from time to your degree. You'll need to show what qualifications you have to do this work. And then finally, discuss your plans for publishing or sharing the results of your research. We can go to the next slide.
And we have to conclude your proposal somehow. What isn't a better way than to discuss how all this work that you will conduct with the funding from Franco Family Institute or any other entity who's supporting you is going to impact your field? How are you advancing the knowledge? What questions are you answering that will lead other researchers to ask more questions? Disseminating your research. Matilda just talked about it for a second, but it's also important to think beyond journals and conferences. Are you going to present that to classes in seminars? Maybe you're developing some other kind of digital humanities or public humanities project that you can work this into. Finally, how is the work that you're doing helping people around you? How is it helping the world be a better place? The broader you can go without sounding corny, the better that statement of impact, of significance will be. Lastly, the project you will conclude also has an impact on you. Now, for undergraduates, you are still learning how to do a lot of this research. So one of those bigger impacts is how is conducting this project helping you learn, train in conducting research? For grads who are now, still learning, but you're kind of expected to produce knowledge, how is this project helping you advance your own research agenda and therefore your research career? Think about those questions and make sure that you address them for the reviewers here.
All right, I think that is all for the research discussion. And now we're going to move over to Rebecca Strook, the managing director from the Arts Initiative, and she's going to discuss creative and performing arts projects. Thank you, Rebecca.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lindsay. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Really looking forward to speaking with you a little bit about what it means to engage with creative practice and creative work as part of a research process. I know that might be new for some folks. That might not sound like research, but practice-based and arts integrated research is a really robust and growing field. And it's something the Arts Initiative is very excited to support alongside the Franco. And so really looking forward to chatting with you about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to have a creative focus in a research context, and then share a little bit about how you might demonstrate your technical mastery when you are writing a grant application that has a creative focus to your research, and then talk a little bit about opportunities for community impact. So when I say that a project has a creative focus in a research setting, that means that it involves engagement with the arts as either an object of inquiry. It's the thing you are studying, right? That it's not books or necessarily people. Maybe people are involved if it's a performing arts, but that it is some kind of artistic product, historical or contemporary, or an artistic process that is your object of study. It could mean that the creative focus is methodological. So it's a way that you want to approach research, right? Or it could mean that it's a way you want to share what you learn from your research. So all arts-focused and creative-focused projects don't engage in the same way. There are at least these three ways of having a creative focus to your research. And I'm certainly happy to answer questions later about these three different levels. Sometimes projects include two or all three of these, and sometimes it's just one. It's one area of focus that you're bringing this creative aspect to your research. I think it's important to note that the arts or, creativity, creative focus in a scholarly setting, it often includes the visual arts, literary arts, the performing arts, as well as often architecture and design. So sometimes when people hear arts, they think only visual art, a painting on a wall. That's absolutely part of it, but really there's a robust landscape of artistic practices. And so when you are thinking about whether or not your work might be eligible for grant funding, if you see that there are opportunities for a creative focus or an arts focus, and you're not a visual artist, but you are a dancer, or you want to study dance practices, that falls into these categories. And sometimes it can get a little bit lost. So I just really want to advocate that all of these modes of artistic practice are regularly included in a lot of grant opportunities that have this artistic or creative bent. Also, the arts are increasingly collaborative. So, we certainly exist in a world now where it's not just one medium. A lot of artistic practice moves across different boundaries and definitions, really challenges those definitions, combines, remixes. And so, I just want to encourage folks not to feel like your interests might be excluded in some way because they're not conventional. It's not just one artistic practice, but you're actually mixing or blending. That is really the trend that we see in a lot of grant making for the arts, are a lot of unique interdisciplinary combinations, things that bring together non-arts disciplines with arts disciplines. These are the really innovative projects that we see getting a lot of funding. And so again, just encouraging folks not to think that you have to pick one lane and stay in it, but actually this is a chance, collaborate, think about new ways to do things. What is it that creativity and artistic practice can really bring to a scholarly question? So that's my next point, is that, strong proposals for creative practice projects, or even if it's not practice, some kind of creative oriented project, is still guided by a problem or a research question. So this is something that Michael and Matilda were talking about. So I just want to connect the dots back to the great advice that they shared. You still want to be sure that you clarify for your reader, what is your problem or your research question? And what is your idea about how making something or doing something helps you address that problem or approach that research question in a new way. When I say making or doing, I'm setting up a distinction between analyzing. Of course, we could talk about how making and doing and analyzing are actually very deeply interrelated. But for the sake of trying to clarify the distinction, I've set up this sort of schematic. So you're not looking at something and analyzing it necessarily as your primary mode of engagement, perhaps, but if it's a practice-oriented project, you're making something or you're doing something, and that actually helps you approach it in a new way. And then finally, if it is a practice-oriented project, then your proposal should really focus not only on telling your reader what your creative work is, but what it does, right? Help them connect the dots and say, this is my practice. I'm producing, 300 pieces of ceramic art, and you explain all of that, but then you need to tell them why. What is going to be different or learned or, changed because of as a result of that particular practice? So not only what it is, but also what it does. All right, we can move to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about technical mastery. So this is something that all readers of grants are going to be looking for. Michael and Matilda talked about this in the context of, really demonstrating your knowledge of your field and situating your work within that field. The same is true in many ways for creative projects, but if there is a making component to your work, there is a practice component, your readers are going to want to understand what technical skills you bring to be able to successfully implement your great ideas. There are a lot of opportunities to do this throughout your application. And I find as a grant reviewer that the strongest applications are really weaving this information throughout so that I can feel really confident as a reader that I've seen multiple times this person is prepared to successfully do this project. So I just want to walk you through a few places where I, as a reader, look for evidence of that technical mastery. I look for it in the project description and in the timeline right off the bat. So this is a space where you can demonstrate that you have an appropriate scope for your project and that that's based on or informed by your understanding of how long it takes to do these things. So if it's a semester long project and you have told me that you're going to create 300 ceramic works, I might have a real question if that's actually possible, you know? And then I'm going to look and see, does this person have experience producing ceramic work? Do they know where they're going to do this work? And, you know, how large or small are these pieces? So really just even in your description and timeline, you have an opportunity to give your reader confidence that the scale is appropriate for how long it takes to produce creative work. And then there too in your timeline, have you organized your steps appropriately, right? First, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this. It's an opportunity, again, to give your reader confidence that you know the steps that go into the creative practice project you are proposing, and that you have an idea of how you're going to break down this big, beautiful vision into concrete steps for second and third. Your budget. Your budget's another really important place to demonstrate your technical mastery. So, are you aware of the resources that you are likely to need to complete your project? And do you know how you will or how you might access those resources? Sometimes I've seen brilliant proposals come through that are so visionary, but there's not a realistic sense of how someone will access the resources they need. Maybe they need a really fancy lab space equipped with technical equipment, but they haven't indicated to me where or how they're going to get that equipment. And so there's no budget identified for it, and they haven't expressed how they're going to do it. So, you know, we might award that funding, but then I would have real questions. What are they going to do with that money? Because there's this huge missing component of it, and that might hold me back from advancing a project. So really show that you know what resources you need and how you're going to get them. Encourage you not to forget for things like space rental, promotional materials to build an audience for your work. These are the two main things I see often get left out of practice projects. And so just really highlighting them here. Your plans for collaboration are another opportunity to demonstrate technical mastery. So if you plan to collaborate with other people, tell us a little bit about your plan. Who's going to do what? Why? At what point do they enter the collaboration? Circling back to what Michael shared too, if you are planning for interviews or other kinds of engagement with human subjects as part of your project, even if it's an artistic project, you do still need to plan accordingly for the IRB process. So it is a very common misconception that creative practice projects are automatically exempt from any kind of human subjects considerations or IRB approvals, but that is not the case. And so, you know, even if you're planning interviews as a small component or some other kind of community workshop where then you are studying and writing about what happens from that workshop, that you need to take all that into consideration with your planning to be sure that you have the appropriate IRB exemptions or approvals. And then finally, your portfolio. This will vary depending on the kind of grant you are applying for and at what stage you find yourself in your practice and your training. It's a very common component of a practice project, a creative project, to ask for a portfolio or some other kind of evidence of your technical mastery. Folks just want to see your work. They want to know, what have you done before? What might we expect if your project is funded? What might you be creating? So this might be samples of previous or relevant work. That might be a discrete project. Certainly, if you're an undergraduate, you're early in your training. This could simply be something you're still building toward. You might not have a full portfolio, and that's okay. Getting grant funding for projects as an undergraduate is a way to help build your portfolio. So you can talk about that in your application. You can talk about your coursework that has prepared you, or maybe one smaller scale project you've done so far with, one video clip or a small suite of photo documentation that you have from that project as you're really building toward this. Certainly at the graduate level, there is an expectation for a more robust portfolio. And then once you graduate in the professional world, this will almost always be a requirement. So again, happy to answer questions about portfolio development and usage, but there's a lot of room, especially as you're growing in your training, doing to just help folks understand the kind of work that you are creating. Great. We can go on to the last slide. Oftentimes, one of the real strengths of a community, or sorry, excuse me, a creative practice or artistic project is that there are opportunities to reach different and sometimes larger audiences with your work than some of the conventional scholarly research processes have. Publication is one way to impact the world and impact the community with your work, and creative practice and research that is very artistically rooted also opens up additional pathways beyond and alongside publication. So I always encourage folks who are writing applications for creative funding to encourage people to ask a few questions about the potential for community impact. So first and arguably most importantly, who do you consider to be, quote, the community? If you are asked to express how your project would impact the community, who do you consider the community when it comes to this particular research project? And what's your relationship to that community? It doesn't mean that definition of the community is how you think about community in every instance, because all of us are part of many communities and the definitions of our communities change over time all the time. So for the sake of that particular project that you are proposing, who do you think the community is, who you're trying to reach, and what's your relationship to them? I put this another way. Who's your audience? Why? And how do you think you will reach them with your work? These are really fundamental questions to reflect on if you are asked to write some kind of community impact statement for your work. And then the second question is to ask yourself, does your project have the potential to impact community through its processes, its outputs, or both? So processes, I mean, do you think you will involve people in the making or doing? Is this some kind of community engaged process that you are proposing? And actually, because of the creative practice, you have an opportunity to bring additional people in as co-researchers or interlocutors who are really integral to making your project happen. Maybe your potential for impact is through your outputs. So you're not going to involve other people necessarily in the making you're doing. You're going to do that yourself. It's your artistic practice, but you're going to make some really careful decisions about where and how you share your work and actually try to reach an expanded audience and impact the community that way. Maybe it's a public exhibition of those 300 ceramic works that you've created, or a public performance that you put on and you think about where's the best location to reach the community and the audiences that I understand for myself from the first set of questions I'm trying to reach. It's possible that your project might do both of these things, and that's great. You would want to address both of those. And then finally, another way to think about this is, does your project simply invite more people to enter into a scholarly or creative conversation and think about something in a new way? I love thinking about the idea that the way we ask questions and the way we design our research completely impacts the answers we get, right? So if you are proposing a project that is designed with a creative component, you have an opportunity to actually learn different kinds of things than a different researcher might learn from designing their project differently. So make a case for that. Let your reader know, because I've designed my project in this way, I feel really confident I'm going to have this kind of impact because I'm approaching the question from a different angle. I'm approaching this question through the arts, and it's going to tell us something new or different, and it's going to bring people in. That's a really field-shaping question. That might not be something an undergrad is prepared to answer, and that's okay. As a graduate student, this is certainly something you should be thinking about. How are you shaping your field differently by having this unique approach to your work? And certainly as you move on into professional research positions, this is the kind of field shaping or public impact statement you should be able to answer. Cool. I think we can pause there, and I'll turn it back over to Lindsay.
All right, we just have one slide left before Q&A, and that is the budget. I'm going to talk very briefly about the budget, but just because it's brief, I don't want you to think that that means it's not important. In fact, this is one of the number one problems that we find with people's budgets is they put a lot of time and attention into the proposal, and the budget is a secondary or even an afterthought. So I want you to think of your budget as a key part of your application. It speaks to feasibility. It tells us whether or not you have done the pre-work necessary to go on the trip or to buy the materials you need or to properly compensate your human subjects that you're working with. So the budget tells us a lot. And your budget should be a key part of your application that you put adequate time into. So, regardless of where you're applying, most places will give you a budget template. We have one, Nanovic has one, the Lu Institute has one. If you're applying externally, those external funders probably have a funding template. Use the template that's provided by the place that you are funding. Internally, we are probably, at least, across campus, generally fairly kind. If your budget is readable, then we're going to read it. But once you start applying externally, if you don't use the supplied templates, then your application may be removed right away because you didn't follow the rules. So if a budget template is provided or recommended, use that template because that's what their reviewers are going to be looking for and used to looking at. And you don't want to stand out in a bad way, especially when it comes to something as simple and easy to use as a budget template. Um, Make sure the funds that you're requesting and the amounts that you're requesting are covered by the grant you're applying for. If it's a $2,500 grant, don't ask for $2,800. You're not going to get it. And people are going to wonder if you really read the grant rules, the grant application. If you know what you're applying for, it kind of strikes at your credibility when you start asking for either things that are not covered by the grant or amounts beyond what they say they will cover. And it undercuts maybe some good credibility that you built up through your proposal. So you want to make sure in future that the things that you're requesting are things that they cover, they match the funding requirements that you're applying for, and you're applying in the right amounts. Make sure your narrative budget matches your budget template. Again, I think this is usually just people not taking that budget template seriously, seeing it as a side note or a side thing, and it is not. So for most grants, you're going to write out a narrative budget. I'm doing all of these things. This costs 500, this costs 50. And just very simply make sure what you wrote in your narrative budget matches your budget template. That's going to make you look more credible. It's going to make you look like you know what you're doing, which is exactly what you want. And it's a very simple thing to make your application a little bit more polished so that you don't have a reviewer looking at your narrative and saying, well, they said their flight costs $500, but over here it says it costs 550. Well, now you have a lot of questions. Now you have confusion. Confusion is never what you want in a grant proposal. So just make sure those two things match. Another simple thing that you can do, and this is a little more time consuming, and so sometimes students skip it, grant writers skip it, but provide links and provide details. Don't say, I need $150 for software. Name the software and make sure you know that you've included why you need that specific software, as opposed to a free software, as opposed to something that's available here on campus. Links and details show that you've done the basic homework on what you already have to do this project and that you know why you need this. You know that you need this specific software because it's going to do XYZ things, and the free software that you have available won't do those things. So those kinds of details make you appear more credible and they make your budget look stronger. Links do the same thing. If you say a plane ticket to Paris costs $500 and you don't provide a link, and I know that most plane tickets to Paris are costing 1,000, then we're going to have some questions. Do you actually know what it's going to take to do this project? Are you providing $10 for your participants when other people are providing 40? So links and details really are a key part of showing that your project is feasible, and not only that your project itself is feasible, but that you are an expert and you are going to be able to complete this project well. Finally, it's very, very simple, but please do the math. Make sure that the amount that you are requesting matches all of the numbers that you put into your template. And I don't know if it's the same for all grants, but certainly for Franco grants, we have a field where we ask you to provide the amount that you're requesting. And when that number doesn't match the number in your narrative budget or in your template, then we start to get kind of confused about where these different numbers are coming from. So it's very simple. It's not very time consuming. Just do the math and make sure all of your numbers add up. And that's also going to speak a little bit more in a very easy way about your credibility. So we're at the end of our prepared notes and discussion, and now we have an opportunity for some questions. Um, Is it worthy to mention possible projects with museums, libraries, or archives? Absolutely. I would say, and I will let both Rebecca and Michael and Matilda speak on that, but here at Franco, if you have already highlighted either a potential opportunity to share your work with the community, it still has to be a feasible project, but we also do want to know those things, and we do add that into the discussion of the value of the project, and so that can influence the value. If you are definitely collaborating with these organizations, you definitely want to tell your funders that you are doing that, because again, that speaks to your credibility and to the likelihood that you're going to finish this project because you already have this place to display it. But does anyone else want to add anything on that?
I'll add here that, for grad student applications, I don't think potential is really an option. You need to have a plan, a solid plan where you're going. Even if the work you're proposing to do, let's say over the summer, is purely exploratory. Get the baseline research done for the dissertation, and you're just checking out to see whether these archives, these collections have the materials necessary. You still have to know where you're going, and the grant needs to reflect that you have a solid plan.
I'll just quickly add to that whether you have collaborators or not, you should still have a very distinct project that is your own. A lot of times I get grant proposals from students who are working with a professor, so it's not their project. So you want to make sure that whatever your proposal is, it's your project, even if you're collaborating.
Anything you wanted to add, Rebecca, or do you feel like we covered all of that?
Yeah, feel like you covered it.
Okay, I think that's our only question. We answered. All right, that was answered. If there are no further questions, I'll give it one more minute, but we will wrap up if that is all. Um, All right, I think everyone is leaving, so I think we must have done a good job answering those questions ahead of time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Um,
You all have a great weekend.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And if anyone needs additional support, you can email me. If for undergraduates, you can email Matilda. For graduate students, you can email Michael. Art students are welcome to email Rebecca and myself as well. And this will be available on the Franco family website sometime next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.